Okay, so now we're going to be working on building a frequency chart. And this is a frequency analysis chart. So we're trying to analyze what's happening inside of our song based upon frequency. And the way we're going to do it is we're actually going to hone in on the center position, the strongest points that are emphasized within that frequency. Because most of what you're going to hear embodies really thousands of frequencies going on at one time. And there are numerous frequencies that are present. We really want to focus and emphasize on where the strength of that frequency is. And again, we're just using our ears, so we're not necessarily getting the most accurate representation of that. We're interpreting it to understand and digest what is happening within the mix. Now, technically, you could, in your DAW, if you got an RTA plugin, you could analyze every piece of every element of the information as you're digesting the mix. And that's definitely something that's for a later, more advanced course. In this one, we're just going to lay out some basic principles. The first thing we need to do is we do need a ruler for this and a pencil, and we'll need our headphones and, of course, the song. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually I'm going to use my ruler to mark off 11 points, and I'm going to kind of do it about 2/3 down on my sheet because I need to be able to write the instruments up top. I'm just going to make a single horizontal line, but I'm going to make it from the number 1 all the way to the number 11. I don't know if I did it right. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark off a little tick mark at each inch along the way. Okay, so just a little spot. And these will be actual hash lines when I'm done. So just enough of a mark to see it, whether it's a dot or just a little tick, you're good. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw through that point and just say, all right, that's that marking. These are going to be reference points for the frequencies that we're going to put in. And the frequencies are going to be divided into individual bands, so you're going to see it. And so this is how it works. If you recall our conversation about frequency and ranges, in order to double the octave and move up the next octave on the frequency, we're going to be doubling the frequency in hertz. So we're going to start at our human hearing range low, which is 20 hertz. And I'm just going to put 20 hertz. And then I'm going to move up to, doubling that octave, I'm going to move to 40. So I kind of like just doing things, kind of in kind of a, I don't know, kind of almost like a form and function kind of way. So I'm going to actually do all the math first. So 20, 40, the next one's 80, 160. You see how these are just doubling? So these are octaves up. And if you remember that frequency is equivalent to pitch, this is literally an octave in the same way that you would sing an octave. These are octave leaps through the bands. So then when we cross over here, we're going to notice that we're going to get to a moment where if we do the math and we start to double these numbers start to kind of get big. When we cross over the 1,000 mark, we start to use the kilohertz symbol. I'm going to show you how we're going to simplify this in a second. And I'm just going to keep doubling these. And when we get to the last one, really, this one's just going to be, this is really going to be 2480, but it really represents our high on the high range, which is really 20 kilohertz. So I'm going to go through and add my hertz. Hertz, great. So these are frequencies in cycles per second, so hertz. When we get here, we can start to simplify these. We can, because it's going to be represented as a kilohertz, we can write 1.28 and go kHz, which is kilohertz. And we can do that with the rest of these, 2.56 kilohertz. A lot of times people just call it K in short, 5.12 kilohertz, right? So you kind of see how this is working. In this instance, when we get to we got a lot of digits back here, we're just going to do 10.2, kind of simplify. And this last one's really we can just mark this off as 20 kilohertz, okay? So now, you notice I did the math and I simplified. You don't actually need these bigger numbers here. If you just want to go straight to 1.28, 2.56, 5.12, 10.2, and 20, great. Now, what these represent ranges throughout the band. And they literally go like this. Each range is going to be marked off in groups of 3. And so, if you just kind of want to even hash it out, you could very simply go, all right, well, looking at the way that this is set up in these 3 lanes, 1, 2, and 3, All of this essentially represents our bass. Now I'm going to simplify this a little bit. Notice 1, 2, 3. This is going to represent our mid. And then 1, 2, 3. This begins to represent our high. And then over here we got one more range, sometimes known as the top octave. Now in this range of bass, mid, and high, we have additional features. Pretty much anything under 80 hertz is going to be known as sub. So we could also box off of the bass these two lanes between 20 and 80 are all sub. And then everything else essentially could be identified as in the mid, this is low mid, this is mid, this lane right here, and this is high mid. And in the same way with high, this is the low high, the mid high, and then of course the high. Right, so you could see kind of how these worked out in these ranges. Audibly, I think the big thing with this is just for you to learn what these ranges are. So you need to kind of study these. I want you to add these. We're going to definitely want to have a range here. Now we're ready to listen. So I'm going to bring back the same song we were listening to before. We could just put the title at the top. Of course, you're going to want to put your name. I'm going to put the title of the song, Spinning by Theory of Flight. And just shorthand that for now, just to get rolling with it. Now, here's what we're going to do. In order to kind of represent this best, you're going to write the instrument that you hear in the ranges that you hear. But if it also embodies other areas of the range as a dominant feature, we also need to include it. So let's just say when the kick drum comes in, it's got a lot of low end, but it also has some smack in the high. I'm not going to necessarily write it as a through and through from here to here because it doesn't really represent the emphasis. The emphasis might be down in the low and down into the sub, but then there might be some smack here in the mid-high, and I might want to also write it here. We can provide a little bit of width around that by drawing bubbles like that, or you could literally just write the name with some lanes. So I'm going to use the bubble kind of approach, just trying to, but again, it gets sloppy. You can kind of already see my penmanship is not perfect, so it can get sloppy as we go. But again, we're going to go to this track, and I'm just going to push play, put my headphones on, and start to analyze what I'm hearing through each one of these groups. Well, immediately I notice I kind of feel like, well, if we just start here, that main AC guitar is here. I noticed guitar 2. Darker. Here's that vocal. I feel like a lot of emphasis is over here. So I want to say, all right, it's going to be about this wide-ish. This guy's over here. Again, we're listening high to low on the frequencies. Notice there's no depth in that lead vocal. And remembering that these are octaves, so as his note pushes upward, he's moving upward. Add in a little bit more guitar. There's some piano range. I feel like it's not this low. It's actually probably more over here now that I think about it. It's kind of still in that same spot. We got a little bit of E guitar. I'd say kind of almost over this way. Watch what happens. Ooh, okay. So notice what we did here is this was the opening section of the song, right? So this is like the verse. As soon as the chorus hits, all of a sudden we get kick. We get kick. We get bass, right? Now I still hear some kick slap, so there's still kick like over here somewhere in the high. A lot of bass going on right here. Lower vocals, so we're hearing additional Vox, or you could call it BGB. And then there's higher vocals. Electric guitar, more electric guitar. And those toms are in this range. And you got like tom 1, tom 2. All that cymbal work is really happening over here. Did you hear some of those background vocals are down under? Some of them are up top, filling in the depth. I'm sorry, then one thing I didn't note was that snare. Snare is both here and here. And a little bit up, you can hear some of the very bright stuff up towards the top. There's not a whole lot of space to put that in. And then these strings really kick off up here. Notice right now we're back in the bridge and we're cutting back to this lane. So what's happening is the song essentially is starting small, going big at the chorus, and it's contracting throughout the song to give us that range, what feels like a dynamic range piece, which there are dynamics happening, but we're also seeing frequency ranges expanding as we're going through the song. And again, we're hearing those background vocals jumping from up above to down below. Now we're also hearing octave down strings. It's almost like this range is being handled if you were to kind of slice it up. We got the snare, we got the E-guitar, we got the strings. Great. Those toms and the bass are starting to take over in this range. We got the bright strings, octave ups, but again, that vocal, almost in the same way we looked at in panning, that vocal's taking that center lane mostly. Those strings and cymbals are doing this upper stuff. And we're watching the end of this kind of extend. Listen to the last tail end of this. As we splash off into that final ending, those effects are kind of kicking off into the high. So quite brilliant how that's getting set up. But overall, that's just one of those things that we really kind of have to like look at is like, how do we, if we're going to address this, we're going to be analyzing songs, trying to figure out where they're fitting in the frequency ranges to find out how to better our mixes by utilizing those frequency ranges.